Welcome to another edition of Real, Raw, and Honest. I'm so glad you're here today, and I appreciate you. I appreciate every like, every share, every word of encouragement, every comment that I get. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe and share with those that you know might struggle with a fear of failure. Maybe it's you. It's one of those things that affects so many of us much of the time. And I can think back to, a time when I think that this became a real thing in my life. And some of you have heard this story before, but, I've always been able to write. And so, when I was in grade school, don't remember what grade I was in, we had an essay contest. And the way that the contest worked, and maybe you can remember how this worked back in the day, is that you wrote an essay, you submitted it. If you did well, you got to read it in front of your class, and then you got to do it in front of the school, and then you got to do it in front of the parents, and each time you did well, your essay or poem or whatever it was submitted to the next level, going to the province, going eventually all the way up to, you might have to go to Ontario to read your essay. So we were I had gotten to the place where I was to speak it in front of the parents, and my mom was there, and I was really nervous about getting up to do this. And I had my little cue cards, and I had, put them together, but I hadn't numbered them. And when I got up to go to the front, when I was called, I dropped my cards and they went all over the place. And I just kind of quickly scrambled and put them back together. And they weren't in order. They were upside down. They were backwards. They were a mess. And consequently, that part of my essay did not go very well. But what it did is it planted a seed inside of me to be afraid of success, to be afraid of failing. And so knowing where the fear of failure can come from is hugely important when we look at this. So, we don't want to look foolish. And, especially when it comes to things like public speaking or anything public that you might be doing, whether it's performing or singing or acting or dancing or any of those things that are public events, it can cause you to not want to do it, to step back and to allow someone else to go ahead, even though you might be the person that's the best for you might be the best one out there. You're going to step back and let somebody else do it because you are afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being ashamed. And so, another thing is that, fear of failure can also, come from, you're afraid of losing your job if you make a mistake. That's a part of fear of failure. If I make a mistake, I'm going to lose my job. And I have worked with people with that before, when they feel like if I make a mistake, I've made a mistake, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to get punished severely for having made this mistake. They don't struggle with that anymore. They're good. They can go to work. They know they're a valuable employee. They can make a mistake and they can keep on moving. And even for myself, I look at where I am today and I go, wow, the Lord has done an amazing work in me as I've come through some of this myself. So, some of the other areas that we're afraid of failure can be in relationships, right? Like, before we get married, while we're married, while we're dating, that there's this fear of losing relationships that are close to us. There's a lot of reasons behind that, which we're not going to get into today. But there's also health anxiety, losing our health, right? Like, this is why some people work out excessively and they exercise, they take vitamins, they take supplements because they're afraid of losing their health. To them, it becomes a sense of failure. If I don't do this, then I will be seen as having failed in this area of my life, especially if it's something that's important to them. But here's the kicker. In life, you're going to fail. Like, it doesn't matter what we're doing. It doesn't matter where we're going. It doesn't matter what you do for work. You're going to fail. We all do it. From time to time, we fail. So that's just a part of life. And so we can either decide that we're going to sit back and do nothing, or we're going to face that fear and we're going to move forward, maybe even slowly, but we're going to face it and we're going to move forward into a life where we're not controlled by this spirit of failure, by this fear of failure. It is something that fear shrinks your world. It just eventually causes you to be in this state where you're afraid to go anywhere or do anything. and it will cause you to pass up promotions and job opportunities and lots of movement, going places, whatever it is that's on your desire to do. That fear of failure will be a hindrance for you in that. So, but here's the thing too, it's not about the failure so much as it's what you do with the failure when you fail, because nobody ever looks at a baby when they're starting to walk and they go, "Oh, that baby fell over, that what a foolish thing to do." No, we encourage, we support, and so it's what we do with the failure that we suffer that's going to determine where we end up. So let's go back to me. And when I was in grade school and I dropped my cards and they were all out of the place and all over the place and upside down and backwards, that was humiliating, because there was probably 100 people in attendance, and it was humiliating. And those people were parents, right? So it's not like I'm doing this in front of my peers. I'm doing this in front of a group of parents, then plus the other kids that were there, so well over 100 people. It was terrifying. And so what I did with that is I determined that I was never going to do any public speaking ever again. And then God laughed and said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." And so what we do with that failure, the first time you get up and you decide to face that thing, you're going to be very afraid. I remember the first time I did public speaking after that, I was asked to share my testimony in front of a Women's Aglow meeting. Again, I don't know how many people were there, 150-ish, 200 maybe. And I was terrified. I was so terrified that I was afraid to move, because I thought if I move, I'll fall over, because I was shaking so badly. But here's the thing. It's what you do with that failure. If you face it and you move forward. Now, I can't even count the numbers of times I've been asked to speak in various places, and it's just, do I get nervous? Sure. Do I get excited? Yes. All of those things are still very real, but I keep progressing and I keep facing it, because if I don't keep facing it when I'm asked, the enemy is just going to try to shut me down one more time and to silence me one more time. And if God has given me a voice that he wants other people to hear, then who am I to hide it in a closet? No, I need to get up and I need to be doing what God has called me to do. And so here we are. So it's what you do with the failure that matters. So, failure happens. It doesn't matter what you do. Maybe you started driving and you've got your learners, no problems, and you got your drivers, no problems. Maybe you've driven for 50 years and never had a car accident. Good for you, right? I'm happy that that's been the way it's been for you, but that is not usually the case. There's usually something that comes along. And so failure, it's going to happen to you at some point or another in some area of your life. But the thing is, it's about trying to take back that thing that caused us to stumble in the first place, right? So it's not just about trying. It's about trying again if you've fallen. So what was it that caused you to fall? What was it in my case? It was the fear of looking out at all these adults and feeling, not support, because although that was probably there, that's not what I was feeling. I was seeing all the 200 eyeballs plus looking at me. If there's 100 people, there's 200 eyeballs, and seeing all the people and, parents, it was just a terrifying experience for me as a young child. So, but trying again, after the first time I spoke at the Women's Aglow, then I was asked to start doing other things. And each time I did it, it was terrifying. But I kept facing it. I kept getting up and I kept doing it. So fear of failure, the first thing you have to do, like with all fears, is begin to face it to some level or another. Maybe you're never going to do any public speaking, and that's fine. But maybe you will, right? So it's trying again. And in order to succeed, we have to try again. In order to conquer something, we have to try again. We can't sit back and go, okay, I failed. We have to go, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again until I'm successful. when we learned to ride a bike, how many times did you fall off your bike before you knew that it was, before you were successful in riding it? These are some of the things, right? How many times did you attempt to cook a meal before you got it right? Like, these are just some of the things, right? How many times did you have to take that test for your career before you actually aced it and were able to move forward? These are fear of failure things that to look at it and go, I don't need to be afraid of it. I don't need to be concerned with it. I can continue. Sorry, that's the cat. That's not an earthquake. That was the cat. So, in order to succeed, we have to try, and then we have to try again when we have failed. So, maybe you were raised in a home where failure was a bad thing. Maybe, when you were a kid and you failed, you were made to feel bad. Maybe you were talked down to. Maybe you were ridiculed. Maybe you were shamed. That can be the case. And if that's the case, well, that's your history. So that can make us afraid. That can make us afraid to try anything new. That fear of failure then can have a real grip on us, because if the people that are supposed to be the most supportive to us are not being supportive, but rather ridiculing and shaming, that's a big deal, especially as a kid. And that can kind of get buried inside of us. And that can kind of be something that we look back to, because what was supposed to be a safe and nurturing environment wasn't a safe and nurturing environment. However, the same situation can happen in a home where you're nurtured and where there's a loving home environment, where there's training for when you do make a mistake. There's tools that are given to help explain how you move forward, how you get past it, how you could do it better next time, how you can succeed. There's encouraging words, all of those things that help us to learn and to be confident to try again. And if you don't have that, if you didn't have that growing up, well, then you have to find a way in order to make that happen in your life now. Some people call this reparenting, but I just call it inner healing, because the thing is Jesus Christ is big enough to do all of this work in and for us. But as a child, we didn't have the tools to be able to look through all of those things and kind of, look at it and go, okay, so this, because I didn't have this, now what do I do? Because I don't have it. It's not in there. But we have an adult brain now. And as we get that inner healing, we can begin to think more like an adult, more trained up, more wise. And we can look at our situation today and we can break it down logically. And we can go, well, if I try, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then ask the Lord to come in and to bring healing into those areas of fear that were planted in us as kids. So it's just, there's so many things that go back to the way that we were raised when we were growing up, right? So if we were raised where failing actually equaled discipline and punishment and berating conversations, well, then we're going to be afraid to fail. But we'll also be afraid to try. So you see how the two go together. So maybe, I don't know what your home life was like. I know I didn't get a whole lot of encouragement when I was growing up, but neither did my siblings. And the thing is like, you know what, you learn as you grow up and as you grow older that I didn't want to stay in the little box of fear of trying, fear of failure. I wanted to move past that in a healthy way and succeed and do the things that God called me to do with courage and boldness. And so that just made me look back and go, okay, so because of these events, I'm going to ask the Lord to come in and bring healing. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. It's some steps that you can take in order to help you get past this fear of failure. So the thing is and this is the same. We can look at this through all things, right? In every area of anything that we struggle with, we need to get healing for our past wounds. Those areas of our life that caused us to be tripped up and caused us to struggle, those things that cause us to have fear of failure, those things that cause us to be angry, those things that cause us to have a depressed attitude, all of those things, we need to go to the Lord and we need to get healing for those things. We need healing and we need to ask the Lord to bring that to us. So if we don't get healing, we are going to be our first, not cheerleader. We're not going to be the one that's rah, rah, you can do it. If we don't get the healing, we're going to be our biggest critic. And we are going to be our loudest voice of negativity. That's what's going to happen if we don't allow the healing to take place. If we don't allow the Lord to move us past this, and maybe you know this, maybe you do this yourself. I remember being shocked. Joel was, oh gosh, maybe a year old at this time. And we had some people over at the house, and he had just started a business. And he was talking about, he was showing us his business actually. And he was quite excited when he sat down. But as he was explaining it, he got flustered and he made a mistake. And in explaining how, I can't remember what it was working. And when he did that, he began to berate himself so much that I had to go, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, he's like, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I made such a stupid mistake. What's wrong with me? Does anything work up here? And he was just really being hard on himself. That's what's going to happen. He needed inner healing. He needed the Lord to come in and to bring healing. So that voice was silenced and the voice of encouragement could be heard. So we don't want to have that voice in our head that's saying you're stupid, you're an idiot, you can't do it, you're never going to be successful, you're never going to make it. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what happened with his business. I don't know whether he was successful or not. It was somebody that we had a brief encounter with for a short period of time, and I have no idea what happened to him. I do pray that he did well with his business, but I was shocked and astounded at the attitude that he had. And I had not even begun to go through my own inner healing work at that point yet. So the thing is also, without getting that healing, we might even go so far as to self-sabotage any success that comes our way. A lot of people who come out of a chaotic home life and people who have been in a situation where they have had to learn how to parent themselves as a child, they have sometimes they have great abilities to be able to see things long term, and that means they can often be seen as somebody who would be an asset in a leadership position. But if the thing is, if we don't get healing for it, and if we have this fear of failure, if we have the fear of trying to do something new, we will self-sabotage when we're invited into a new role, given a promotion, whether we're, asked to move to another city in order to start a part of the business there. We will self-sabotage that. And so we don't want to be able to do that. So these are just some of the reasons, because, God might not want you to be a billionaire, but he does want you to be successful within the areas of the things he's put inside of you to do. He wants success for you. Like I said, you might not be a millionaire, you might not be a billionaire, you might not have a jet, but you are going to be successful in the realm and to the extent that the Lord has determined for you. So we don't want to, even when it comes to the things of the spirit, we don't want to hinder our destiny, and we don't want to and our future in the Lord and the things that God has called us to do because of a fear of failure. Maybe you're prophetic, or maybe, you like to pray, but the fear of getting up and publicly praying, or the fear of, walking into your destiny prophetically, or, walking into, the call of God on your life to minister and to preach and to lay hands on people, to pray over them, is keeping you back and keeping you in a seat you need. I'm encouraging you today to conquer that fear by the tools I'm going to hand you in just a moment here. We don't want those things to hold us back. We don't want the fear of failure, and we don't want the fear of trying to keep us back. We know that in the scripture it talks about, the talents and the man who buried his talents. We don't want to bury our talents. We want to go forward and do all that God has called us to do the way he's called us to do it, when he's called us to do it, with the abilities he's given us, so that we can have success. And remember, they didn't all have 100% success. Some had 30, some had 60, some had 100, right? So let's look at it and go, maybe you're called to 30%, but if you're only going to sit in your seat, you're never going to even reach that 30%. So I want to encourage you today to move forward, to get the healing that you need, so that you can do what God has called you to do. So I want you to take a new look at doing something new. I want you to take a new look at the fear of failure, and I want you to look at it in a way that, should I fail, it's going to be an opportunity for growth. That should I fail, it's going to be an opportunity for me to mature in the things of the Spirit and to go forward with God into that I'll know more next time, so that next time when I do it, I'm going to have greater success. So even if I'm uncomfortable, I know that God is going to work all things together for my good so that I will become all that He's called me to be and to do. So we have to accept that the experience of failure is a tool for our growth. If we can begin to see it that way, just like when we're encouraging our kids or our grandkids or even ourselves to begin to ride a bike, we're going to know if I can encourage them to do that, then I can encourage myself to do this thing that seems so scary to me, that fear of failure. If I can encourage them, I can encourage myself. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for maturity. So let's not avoid it. Let's embrace it. And one little step at a time, one little step at a time, just one little thing at a time, and you're going to make it through. So let's take a look at some tools, shall we? And this is where we're going to wrap up. The tools are, let's take a look at where this fear of failure came from. Did it come from harsh words and judgmental conversations and berating that you may have got from your mom or your dad or from your grandparents or from a teacher or, anybody along the line who was in a position of authority over you that made you feel stupid, made you feel incapable, made you feel like your failure, your mistake was something that should be flaunted and ridiculed and made an example of. Again, I think I've mentioned this before, is that when I was a kid in school, if you made a mistake, you made a mistake in school during any of the classes, the teacher created a dunce cap, a white cap in a cone from a piece of white unlined paper, and you would have to sit at the front of the class with this dunce cap on. And although I never had to do that, I know there was many of the boys in the class that needed to do it, and it was just devastating for all of us to be able to see that. Now, where does it come from? Go back. Do the apologies. Not the apologies, rather, but the forgiveness that you need to do in that situation so that you can walk out of the prison that you're in. Forgive them deeply. Forgive them for making them feel the way you felt when they talk to you the way they talk to you. The second thing to do is to begin to admit that you have a fear of failure because of the things that were said and done. Because you remember the sting of that rejection. You remember the sting of that ridicule, of all of the feelings of shame that you felt during the moment, and you don't want to relive it. You don't want to experience it, but take it to the Lord and just say, I have a fear of failure now because of this, and it's holding me back from the fullness of what God wants me to do. So I'm going to forgive these people for what they did, and I'm going to release those feelings to you, Lord, because I don't want to carry them anymore. I want to walk in the fullness that you've called me to. So then the third thing is to invite Jesus into the pain and into the wounding that you suffered in your childhood when you were made to feel like making a mistake was wrong, or by the teacher who made you feel like making a mistake was something that should be made an example of, or whatever it is. And just ask the Lord to come into your pain and your wounding and to begin to bring healing to you in that. And number 4, then release the events that come to mind when you're going through this. Just release the events, release the emotions, and even if there's tears that are there, let them flow. And just allow the Lord to come in and as you look at it to just release it. Just release it and let it go. Take your time. It might take you longer than 30 seconds, and that's okay. You might want to sit there with the Lord in this moment for 5 minutes, and that's okay. You take the time you need and visit this as often as you need to. And then the last thing is to ask the Lord to help you to see failure as an opportunity for growth and maturity. So then after you've done all the forgiving and you've asked the Lord to bring a healing, you've released it to him, you've given it to him, you've laid it at his feet, you've walked away from it. Now you're going to ask the Lord to help you to see that where this fear has been that's crippled you, that you would begin to see it in a different light and begin to see it as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity for maturity in the Lord, right? You just want to say to the Lord, I want to use the talents and the abilities and the gifts that you've given me, and I want to use them to the fullest extent. And then just allow him to do so. And so that's it for today, for fear of failure. I hope you found this encouraging. I hope you found it enlightening. And so as you go through your week, I ask that you would just take the time to sit with the Lord and to allow him to bring up an event or a circumstance or your childhood, and allow him to just do what only he can do. That's the joy of inner healing, is it's the Lord's work. It's up to the Lord to do the work. Next week, I'm going to have a guest. Cheryl Shea is going to be with us again, and we're going to be talking about fear and a lot of the different aspects of fear from her professional standpoint. And so she's always such a great person to have on the call, on this Real, Raw, and Honest. She's just such a wealth of wisdom. And so join us next week. It's going to be at 1:00 next week, and it's going to be live. I'm hoping to be placing that on Facebook as well as on YouTube. It will be on YouTube for sure, so follow me on that. Please share this video if you know somebody who can benefit from this today. Like it, subscribe if you haven't, and please leave a comment. Thank you so much to everyone. God bless you all.